I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today's guest lives by one motto: inspire, connect, empower the next generation. And the guest that goes by that motto is Mr. Olaolu Ogunyemi. He is a proud U.S. Marine officer, an award-winning author, and passionate leadership mentor on a mission to build strong leaders from the boardroom to the living room. As the founder of Parent Child Connect, he helps empowers parents, educators, and mentors to bridge the gap with the next generation through practical, purpose-filled strategies. His children's book, Crow from the Shadow, earned critical acclaim and introduced thousands of families to healthy conversations around emotions, choices, and self-worth. He has also contributed to Forbes, YouVersion, Military Families Magazine, and other national outlets on topics ranging from fatherhood to leading with empathy and discipline. Whether speaking to emerging leaders, podcast audiences, or classrooms full of children, Olaolu discovers an energizing blend of military precision, parenting wisdom, and soulful storytelling. So, Olaolu, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I can't wait to hear your story today.
Absolutely, Noah. Thanks so much for having me, man. I've been looking forward to it, so I'm ready to dive in.
So, if you could just kind of share, kind of go from childhood. I understand from your thing that you kind of had an interesting childhood growing up, that you kind of were in kind of an okay home, I would say. Kind of explain a little bit more about how childhood was like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I was born the fifth of six children, so it's a pretty big family. And honestly, my parents and my family, they are my support system. They're wonderful human beings, and they did a wonderful job of just being there for me, supporting me, and providing me what I needed to really thrive in life. One of the things that I had to learn, though, is how to grow through insecurity for myself. They always were trying to encourage me and always and talking to me and really talking me up and trying to make me a better man than I was. But at the time, I really was going through just feeling like I wasn't a part of a team, a part of something outside of the home. And when I say that, it's because, I grew up in Ruston, Louisiana with the name Olaolu Ogunyemi, right? Let's just start there, right? I was already one of the guys that, because that name wasn't necessarily what you consider a normal name in Ruston, Louisiana, that already started me off as a little bit different from everybody else, which as a kid, as you know, you don't want to feel like you're different. And then I was overweight and I had all these other things that I was really self-conscious about. I had a gap in my teeth and all these things I'm just really became real self-conscious about. And for that reason, I started trying to find ways in with the crowd. And what I ended up doing, and this is what you're talking about with my upbringing, is that I decided to start going and trying to impress others. And some of the guys I was trying to impress, quite honestly, they were doing some things that we shouldn't have been doing. And to put that in perspective, many of the guys that I grew up with and I was best friends with are in the system right now, or they're fresh out of prison. And so that's just kind of the crowd I was keeping just because I wanted to fit in. And to be honest with you, it felt like they were accepting me for who I was, but really they were accepting me because I was doing whatever they asked me to do, not necessarily because I was trying to help lead them. So that's really where I came from. That was my background. And honestly, what probably put me on a trajectory towards right, number one, is that my parents never gave up on me. I stressed my mom and dad out. I can't, I mean, my dad came from Nigeria, right? You can imagine traveling thousands of miles and you are dedicating your life to your family. They actually moved from a spot in Detroit that they were in to Louisiana so that way he can raise a family. And then here I am just going out and just doing all kinds of stuff and getting in trouble. So I stressed them out, but they never gave up on me. And that's one thing I had to say about them. If they would have given up on me, who knows where I would be. And I also had a community of people who were helping to extend my home. And instead of them saying, "Hey, go to the back," they were always come back and say, "Hey, man, you're better than that." And so that's really my story from childhood and ended up growing up and joining the Marine Corps. I graduated from Grambling State University with a degree in computer information systems. From there, I commissioned, joined the Marine Corps, which a lot of people were sort of confused about because I was one of the guys who was blessed to get out of college and get my information systems degree and go to Tyson Foods to become a computer programmer. And then you have this weird switch where I end up joining the Marine Corps. And quite honestly, I think part of me was that rebel was still in me from middle school that I never shook. But I ended up joining the Marine Corps, and the rest is history. I'm married. I have three children. And just to put in perspective, another part of my story is that by the time I graduated college, I was already married and I had a 3-year-old. So just to put that in perspective, there's a lot of learning that I did in my life and situations, quite honestly, that I put myself in. But I've been blessed to have mentors and a support system who've been able to guide me through a lot of these issues.
What was it about the Marine Corps that really saved you from possibly ended up in jail? Because you said that you could have easily ended up in prison. What kind of helped you stay on the path to successful and kind of be able to really make a name for yourself?
Absolutely. So the Marine Corps is a perfect example of it, but it was really just identity outside of where I was. And so for me, I started to identify with being a troublemaker because it made me feel good. It was an easy way to get laughs, and I feel like that, hey, go do this or go do that. And so I had to find a new identity and find something that I could be a part of. And so for me, first it was sports. But I had coaches that would come in, and I mean, I played basketball, ran track, I did all these things, and it was just an opportunity for me to come out of my shell, if you will, and go into another location where I was a little uncomfortable because I wasn't the best basketball player and I wasn't the fastest track runner. But it was good to have coaches who kept bringing me in and kept working with me, and then you start to feel like you're a part of something bigger than yourself. And in this case, it was a team. And so I believe that's really what set me on the right trajectory. And then from that moment on, I've been craving that team environment. And so whether it's my family that I have to build that team environment with, or like you're alluding to, the Marine Corps, it's like the epitome of a close-knit team. We're celebrating in the year 2025 our 250th anniversary, our birthday, as we call it. And that's one of the things that Marines take very is real. We take pride in our tradition, take pride in everything that we believe in, and I believe that's really what it's all about. It's about having those men and women to your left or right who are all headed in the same direction, have shared common values, and we just go in the same direction. We're all a part of a team, and really, I think that's what made the biggest difference in my life. I learned how to not identify with someone else, and I learned how to align myself with a team that's actually headed in a good direction.
Can I just share a little bit more about the Marine Corps? A lot of people that go into the Marines have like this story that everyone kind of goes in a changed man and they come back and they're not the same person. What was your experience like being in the Marines?
Well, the biggest thing is you have to stop worrying about yourself, and that's one of my biggest experiences right off the bat. I came into the Marine Corps not knowing anything about it. I always tell people that I only knew two Marines before I joined the Marine Corps, and that was Gunny Ermey from Full Metal Jacket and Major Payne. And so by the time I joined the Marine Corps, I'm just figuring it all out for myself. And one of the biggest things they taught you is it's not about you. It's about always going to be about the team. And I believe that kind of selfless lesson is what really helped me first thing because it's like, Coming from an environment where we were obviously in college, as many people know, you're there really for yourself in some ways. Like you're paying a lot of money to get a degree, and yes, you're going to be a part of a team, but you're in a way you're competing for a job. You're going to the interview process. Like I had to get an internship, and I got one at Tyson. And then you want the job, right? So you have to make sure your resume is built. You have to make sure you're doing your community service and so on and so forth. And there's always this thought about me. How can I now make it to the next level? And yes, of course, you have things in the back of your mind. Like I was a part of fraternity, so of course we all wanted to be in this big organization and do these things. But at the end of the day, I was at college, so that way I can go to the next stage of my life. Whereas in the Marine Corps, it's not about you. It's really, truly about the team. And that's one of the biggest things that helped me out is starting to realize that my role, especially as an officer in the Marine Corps, is not to be there for myself. It's really to provide the resources for everybody who I work with to be successful. And I had to learn that the hard way. I had to learn once again as a child, like I had to learn a lesson how to be myself. Well, I had to learn that same lesson as an adult in the Marine Corps because I saw the model of what I thought leadership was in some cases, and a lot of times it was getting out in front and yelling at people and making them do what you want them to do. And you think, and it's like, well, I'm instilling discipline. I make sure they adhere to the standard. That's how I felt, especially as an operations officer. And I had a mentor come up to me and say, "Man, why are you doing that?" And he really coached me through it. And I realized that I was starting to become somebody who I really wasn't. And so once again, the Marine Corps was able to help me now refine my leadership style and just be myself. I enjoy who I am. I enjoy people. I love people. I love meeting people. And one of the things that I was doing, especially in my early days as an operations officer, is I was just, really turning people off to me, just because I was under the guise of trying to accomplish a mission. So those are just a few things that the Marine Corps has taught me is being selfless and once again, learning how to be yourself.
So after you had kind of came home from the Marine Corps, what was kind of the next steps that you wanted to do after leaving the Marines? Did you have kind of a game plan? Did you um kind of feel lost coming home?
Well, I'm actually still in the Marine Corps, active duty. But even so, while I'm in the Marine Corps, there's always this idea that we all have like this looming date that we're going to get out. We always try to think through, okay, what's the next step? What are we going to do? And then for me, I started always thinking about, well, the Marine Corps is just one part, and it's a very important part of my life right now. But there's also things that I need to be doing outside of the Marine Corps to inspire others, and that's where you see a lot of things as you're talking about in the intro, is that I started this Parent-Child Connect series, start off as a book series, and then turned it into a platform and really scaled it into leadership training in general. And that's because I really wanted to start investing in people more. And that's where we start to look at, okay, as an active duty Marine, obviously your focus is going to be on Marine Corps service. That doesn't go away. But there's also the time that you have. If you budget your time wisely, you have time to invest in other areas. And that's always encourage Marines and anybody in any profession. Budget your time wisely so that way you continue to pursue your other passions that aren't aligned or may not be aligned to your primary day job. And so that I started doing. I started really trying to explore the world of writing and becoming an author. I've tried to explore the world of coaching, which I do for leadership, and I explore the world of speaking and just getting out there and trying to help share my passion for helping others grow into the impactful leaders that they're going to be.
And part of that is that you had released a book, as I had mentioned in the intro, Crow from the Shadow. Kind of share a little bit of how you came up with that title and what kind of the book means to you.
Sure. Yeah. So Crow from the Shadow was my first children's book. And it really is came from a personal spot because I've already told you about my insecurities and things of that nature. But there's also this idea of the shadow. Now, when we talk about the shadow, there's always this picture that we get, and that's exactly what I wanted readers to get, especially parents. Because the idea with all my books is that parents or adults in general, parents, teachers, mentors, caregivers, are sitting down with their children and reading these books. So Crow from the Shadow is really talking about number one, the crow, who's an unlikely hero. Most people don't know anything about a crow other than they pick through the trash and things of that nature. But what I like to say is that the crow is misunderstood. So that's the first reason I chose him. The crow is a misunderstood animal. Nobody really cares about why the crow is picking through the trash and making noise. They just say that, man, that's what he's doing. And that was me, right? So nobody cared. And I say nobody, I'm using that term very loosely. Of course, my family cared, but outside of family, not many people cared of why I was acting out. All they want to do is treat the symptoms, right? They want to say that, okay, well, he's acting out, so we need to throw him to the back, or maybe he should go where they're going. He'll learn his lesson. He had to learn a hard lesson, and so on and so forth. It's amazing what you hear people say. And I hear people say these same things about children. But in many cases, I believe, just like the crow, were misunderstood. So that's the first reason I picked the character. And I'll talk about the second reason a little bit later. But the shadow, as we talked about the shadow, it's a person, place, or thing that tells you that you cannot be or you cannot do something, right? So in this book, it's a rhyming story. It talks about how the crow would like to wear blue, but wear blue, but the shadow tells him he has to wear black. He tells him he wants to read, but he tells him reading is boring and things of that nature. And as he goes through the story, he begins to realize that the shadow is actually just sort of holding him back and not really telling the truth. And at the end of the story, Crow realizes that only one can determine my future. That one is me. And that's what the story is all about. And that's the second reason I chose a crow. It's to remind people, remind children and parents, every time they see a crow fly by, that only one person could determine your future, and that person is you. And that, again, comes from a personal spot because I had to make a choice one day that I couldn't allow myself to continue to go down the path that I was going, hanging out with some of the people I was hanging out with. And so every last one of us has an opportunity to take control of our destiny. And that's one of the biggest things that we're trying to encourage children to do through our Crow from the Shadow story. It's to allow them or help them to take ownership of their own fate and go forth and be the person who they were created to be.
And and you actually have a book coming out soon that's called Lead Last, and it's share a little bit with me about behind a little bit more of the behind the storyline of Lead Last and how you came up with that title.
Yeah, Lead Last is a fun story for me. This is one of the ones that I initially was going to self-publish, but ended up signing with a publisher, and it's been an interesting process for the last few months because I self-published my other books, and it's just something that I'm learning. You don't have control over the process, and it's great. I think they're going to do a phenomenal job of helping me to push the book to where I want to go. And so, Lead Last is a story. It's really a double entendre. In one case, I'm saying that in order for us to be effective leaders, there's things that we need to do first. And that is get to know ourselves, get to know the people we're leading, and become familiar with the environment we're leading in. So that way we can create an environment of growth and impact. And then the second reason I say that, and the second reason behind the title, Lead Last, is that we have to understand that as leaders, especially like for me, when I joined the Marine Corps, I thought it was all about being out in front, jumping in front of the room, being the loudest voice, and so on and so forth. Like, the movie 300 with King Leonidas. That's the kind of leader I aspire to be. But then I realized that really it's not about that. And as we talked about before, leadership is really about providing resources from others for others. And so in that case, there may be times where you're behind someone, you're pushing them forward, or you may be beneath them, lifting them up so that way they get celebrated instead of you getting all the credit for the ideas and things of that nature. And very seldom are you truly out in front unless you're trying to bring someone else to project them and put them above yourself. So that's what Lead Last is all about. It's about understanding that our role isn't just to be out in front and to be the person who is always out speaking and trying to be project ourselves as a leader, but rather it's to provide resources for others and really to be last in the sequence of things. You're worried about yourself last, and I think that's where we were talking about a little bit earlier. It's not about you. Lead Last is about servant leadership. It's about being selfless, and that's what that book is all about.
So one of the I think important things is you're also a father, and you asked it earlier, had said you're a father of three kids. How has this foundation kind of helped you in in terms of your parenting journey? Have you learned any kind of new methods and techniques from opening Parent Child Connect, or has there been any kind of tools that you've used that has helped you in your personal parenting journey?
Yeah, great question. So I've had a few things that I've learned. Number one, when you're running a platform called Parent Child Connect, you have to do research. You have to continue to read and try to become a better parent yourself and a better leader yourself, so that way you can learn. So there's been a few things that I've learned. Number one, every child is different. Every single child is different. And I know we say that, but I don't think sometimes we appreciate that as parents, that quite literally these humans that came from you, that are a part of you, are different from who you are. They're different from who I was as a child. And I know sometimes we have amnesia, but they even get in trouble in different ways, and sometimes they're very similar ways. And what that means for us is that we have to learn how to lead the child that is in front of us. There's a lot of books and a lot of recommendations. I have resources on my website, for example, but none of them work if you don't use them in context of your home. So that was the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned is that you have to meet the children where they are. That means that we have to sometimes get out of our comfort zone. It's hard to keep up. And I swear to you, man, and as I know, as I sit here in front of you, I am so sick of hearing stuff like 6'7". I swear to you, if I had to keep hearing that, I may just move us to the moon or something. I don't know. I'm so sick of hearing that garbage. But that's a part of their life, right? And so I can't just be like the old, boomer version of Olaolu, just like, I'm sick of these kids, get rid of them. I'm like, you have to understand, get in their world a little bit, see where they're coming from, understand like why they're saying what they're saying. Now, I'm not saying that as parents or mentors or whatever our role is in a child's life that we have to try to be like them. That's to me that's ridiculous. And this is where I recommend people to be flexible, not malleable, right? In other words, that you can flex and understand their environment and you can adapt to, what they need in that moment, like a counselor or maybe a teacher or maybe a mentor or a friend or a shoulder to lean on. You can adapt, but you don't have to be malleable. And what that means is like you can easily, there's a fine line between the two. You can easily go and be like, okay, well, I'm going to be, my child's best friend, and I'm gonna walk around with, my hat backwards or whatever else I think looks cool. And in reality, you look ridiculous because you're just putting on a mask, and they can see right through it. And so that's some of the recommendations I have is that just meet them where they are, get to know what their interests are, and as they continue to grow older never betray reading. I think that reading with children is really important. And sometimes I think we lose that as they get older because we forget that we do it as adults. We still do book clubs and we do like Bible studies and things of that nature. We do all kinds of reading together. We do group studies at school. We do all these things together. But then as our children get older, we're like, well, they're too old for me to read with them. No, you can still do a book club with your child. You can still do research with them, whatever they're interested in. Sometimes you got to get with them to establish that connection. And that's what it's all about. It's really about establishing a connection. So that way, when times do get rough, that connection already exists. And that's something I'm learning. And I'll give an example. Right now, I'm in the phase with my oldest. Smart as a whip, no, I swear to you. But what happens is at times she just doesn't do her homework. This is now a sophomore in high school. Now, as a parent, I know my wife and I, we know how important it is to get those grades, right? Because once you start looking at scholarships and things of that nature, unfortunately, freshman and sophomore year, they don't like wipe that off your record and just say, oh, whatever. So you
Right.
have to be able to get those grades. And it's hard to try to explain that to a sophomore, but in reality, you still have to do something, right? You have to set boundaries. And so that's what I try to talk to him about because I love my daughter and she's always been a daddy's girl and we have a special relationship. But what I always remind her is that we still have to have boundaries. You still have to have rules. And no matter how old you are, my role in the house is to provide an environment for you to thrive, the best environment for you to thrive. And so for me to just allow you to go and just not do work or to pretend that it doesn't matter will be completely reckless of me as a parent. And it wouldn't teach you real lessons. And the example I used for her is I was like, hey, if you don't pay your bills, they turn off the lights as an adult. And these are things that you need to learn because you're 16 now. And here in just 2, 3 years, you're going to be out of the house. And so those are just some things that as a parent that I've learned as I go through Parent-Child Connect and I've coached parents and worked with different teachers and things of that nature. I've learned a lot from them. And I can go down a list of a lot of things, but those are just a couple of things off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's interesting to be in this kind of parenting concept, I I'll be honest, I didn't really understand the whole what the hell the whole 6'7" thing was. I
Uh,
was so confused. I don't understand what that is. I'm 23 and I'm supposed to know what that is. I don't. I've just seen that online. I'm like, what the hell is that? I don't fully understand what it is. I'm like you. It sounds like complete. garbage to me because I just don't understand what the hell it is. But I, you try to fit in with this crowd, and you always have to be like, oh, well, yeah, I'm part of this. You have to be part of the in crowd, and you always have to try to fit in with their kids. And um, I totally get the whole scholarship things because in high school it really becomes really evident and really important that you get good grades for scholarship. So, I always was kind of never understood that. And then as someone that just recently graduated from college, that's really important. It's really important to get them good grades up for high school. So they come in handy in the future. You may not think it does,
Mhm.
but you'd be surprised at how fortunate and how lucky you'll be to have good grades there. So I think that it's very important to be in your kind of be on the same level as your kids and they fully will understand and that's completely okay. Um, as you had said about parenting and being up with the kids, our world right now is just really interesting to live in. I'll say it's to put it lightly. It's been interesting. How do you, as a parent, introduce these kind of tough topics to your children, but you don't really want to cause fear, you don't want to cause concern in them, but how do you kind of bring these kind of topics up, or do you kind of keep them away from your kids because they may be a little too young?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I'll start with, yeah, try to do age appropriate conversations. That's the first thing I always tell people. But it is tough because number one, we're living in a time now where information is just at our fingertips. It is so quick and easy to get information nowadays, that it's impossible to protect them from that information. And so I believe that the best way to do it is to get ahead of it, right? If you know information, if you're finding out things, and you have to be informed yourself. I always tell people that. Be informed on what's going on in the world, read the news, find out what's going on. I recommend using multiple news sources so that way you don't bias yourself towards any news source. But just read the news, understand what's going on in the world, and then use those to have moments with your children. Teachable and memorable experiences is what it's all about. Again, for me, what I realized is I start thinking through how to talk to children about these events and the chaotic world that we're in. The first thing is to check your own emotions. So what I always tell people is don't project. Because one thing that a lot of times it happens is that when something's happening and we feel very strongly about it, we tend to project on our children. When it comes to elections, or when it comes to especially COVID-19 and things of that nature, the fears that come with all the local news and things that happen, it's easy to just go to our kids and say, man, you got to be careful because you never know. There's people out there getting killed on the street. And that to me is projecting on them. There's another way to say that, right? If there's crime rising in your area, you could easily go to the child and say that, hey, there's crime rising in the area. And so the reason I'm telling you that you need to walk from here to there with a friend, or I'm going to come pick you up from school, or whatever it may be, is because crime rising, and you need to understand that. And here's the kind, you can even explain the kind of crimes that are happening to them, again, at age appropriate level. So that's the first thing. I would say excuse me, don't project. Don't try to show them or put your feelings and your emotions on them. The other thing is don't overcompensate. Don't sit there and just overwhelm them with information or attempt to make them feel better about something going on in the world. Just tell them how it is. They need to know what's the truth and what's going on. You're not going to be able to protect them from it because the information is out there, right? They're going to school, and even if they don't have tablets and computers and phones and all that stuff, they're going to school with people who do. So they're going to find out. So do your best not to try to overcompensate and make them feel good about what's going on. Just talk to them about it. And honestly, the fact that you're talking to them and you're sharing a moment with them is all they need to make it through some of these chaotic environments. And then the last thing I'll say is don't pretend it's not happening. All right. That's a lot of times as parents and as adults in general, and in order to protect children, sometimes we just try to pretend that nothing's happening. In reality, again, they're seeing it. And the fact that you're not mentioning it does not mean that they're going to somehow not understand or not going to get some kind of understanding of what's going on. And I think that's the problem because you never know what source your children are getting or how the information is flowing to them. So if you're just pretending it's not happening and hoping that for the best, you never know what they're learning and how they're now forming their opinions. And before long, there's things that you may see or hear and you're not understanding what the influence was. And so just know that your children are going to be influenced. So pretending that it's not happening is not going to work. So go out and again, get into their world and have an opportunity. If it's over a cup of hot chocolate, whatever it may be, it could be over a rhyming story. And you can relate that rhyming story to a world event. Whatever it is, just sit down with them and have those conversations.
It is an interesting it's an interesting conversation to have. I've talked with numerous guests that have had kids, and I've asked that same question to them that are very vocal about their opinions on the world, and they do this for a living where they come on and they talk about this A, B, and C, whether it's crime, wars that are happening, the realization of job environments and all this stuff. And I've always asked him, how do you mention all this to a kid? And I think a lot of young parents seem to have that kind of problem where they don't know exactly how to say it to a kid. There's a fine line between how old is or how young are you supposed to get them exposed, or how long should they be a
Mhm.
kid? And growing up for me, I the world wasn't really as problematic as it is now. This was like early 2000s for me. So that it was like waking up and kids nowadays, I woke up and watched cartoons in the morning. I would play outside on the weekends if the weather was nice, and the only thing I really worried about was just classes and school, going there and doing homework and stuff. Kids nowadays now have to worry about uh, the chance that they might not make it home from school because of a
Mhm.
school shooting. They might hear about drugs and all this stuff going on at their school. They might get shot from a school shooter. And then they might be out on the street due to funding being real low for a lot of families. So you never quite know how to it, because some people can explain it well to a child, but then there's other parents that don't know how to explain it without being real explicit in a way. And I think it's really important to have those conversations, but it's really important to keep it PG because you don't want to traumatize them too much.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So I'll give you an example. So I was going to school with a Ukrainian officer, two of them. And when the war in Ukraine and Russia kicked off, my children, were in school with some of the children who were obviously their dad was now about to go back to Ukraine to fight. And these are things that they know. They could see it happening. They can hear about the war in Ukraine, and now they can visibly see children whose dad is about to go, and of course they're leaving. So of course they don't have any context. So now here's the situation that I have to try to explain to my children. And to me, I said, okay, this is a perfect opportunity to now explain not just the fact that this is a real thing, and of course it hits close to home because they're military kids, but it also helps them understand what's going on in the world. But to your point, no, it's not time for me to give them gruesome details, right? I'm not going to go and tell them because when I deploy, I don't want them thinking about the most gruesome details for 6 to 8 months. That just wouldn't be fair to them. But what I
Right.
do tell them is that there are bad things happening in the world. And unfortunately, as bad happens, that requires a response from military. No matter what side you're on, there's going to be good and bad, and you're going to have a response. And that's where I try to keep coach them through it and explain that sometimes from a good and bad perspective. And then that question always comes up, but why? And sometimes parents get very nervous, especially young parents. Again, I'm not talking because I'm so old. I'm a young parent myself. But sometimes we get nervous because it's like, man, if they ask too many whys, then how do I answer that? Well, for example, the previous generation, like my parents would have told me after a certain amount of whys, they're like, yeah, because I said so. That's how it was. But for us, we're trying to teach them a little bit more because we realize, as we already said, that there's just so much information coming to them. They're doing, for example, my daughter, my youngest, she was in preschool and when they did their first active shooter drill and they did their first fire drill. So these are two big drills they had at school. And it was hard for me to now explain to her why she's doing an active shooter drill because, of course, they have to rehearse this because things are happening. And
Yep.
she's in preschool. She's a 4-year-old trying to wrap her mind around what an active shooter is or why somebody would come into a school and do that. And so again, it's just taking time to explain to them, that there's good and bad in the world. It's taking time to not try to sugarcoat it and make it anything. Just know that they are already exposed to it is the point. But definitely not try to go through any gruesome details and have them up at night being concerned or not wanting to go to school because they're scared of something to happen. I think that's the worst thing that we could do. But we definitely have to spend some time talking to them about it.
If there's one thing that you hope listeners walk away with after this conversation, what would you like people to really take away from this conversation today?
Yeah, we all have a role to play. When we're talking about helping children grow to who they need to be, I'll use your example. You were talking about graduating college. You have a role to play that I can't. You can reach my children and other children like that I can't reach because when they start looking at me, they're like, "Oh, well, you went to college. You graduated from college X amount of years ago," and you're like, "Well, I just graduated from college." Your words mean more to my children in some cases than anybody they would, and it's just the fact of life, right? And that's how it was for me too. When I was growing up, there was just people's whose words meant more than my parents at some in certain areas, and so that I believe that if we were to walk away with anything from this conversation, is that we all have a role to play, and we have to be willing to step up and don't be afraid to walk up to a young child. For example, we were just at church the other day. My daughter's waiting for us as before we walked in. And this young lady who is probably just graduated college, she looked like she had just graduated college, or maybe she's in college, walked up and started talking to her and found out that my daughter's playing the saxophone, the alto sax. And she shared a love for music. She went to college for music, and they started to talk about it. And the influence that she has in her life is exponentially more than what she may even realize, right? I'm a musician myself, but the fact that she came up to her, introduced herself, and started talking to her about music and tell her, hey, I wish somebody would tell me this, or here's what I'm gonna tell you, and I'm gonna try to walk you through it. And just in that short conversation, that connection means a lot to them. So I said all that to say that always remember that we all have a part to play, and we truly can work together to help our children out. They need all of us. I'm a huge advocate for a community. I don't know it all, and I will never pretend I know it all. So we all have to be a part of our community and help our children out.
Yeah, I like that you kind of had make that reference because I've only been doing podcasting this year since February, so I've almost been doing this for almost a year, which seems crazy because it doesn't seem like it. And a lot of guests that I've had on my show have been surprised at how, for my age, that I have a good podcast for my age. And, I never really had thought about that because I've looked at it and I thought, okay, how many people are in their early 20s that have just graduated college have a podcast?
Mhm.
And I tried sitting here looking, and every podcast I would pull up, it'd be someone older than me. So it was always interesting to hear from other people saying that, for you to have a podcast at this early age that's as successful, you're working real hard for it, was kind of like interesting and fairly enough kind of felt good to hear because it showed that
Mhm.
a lot of good hard work was going into it. And I think it is true what you said. I think um people that are around my age, if I gave them advice, they'd listen to it, compared to someone that was older than me or way older than I am would give advice to the same person same age as me, because they the person, if someone's older and they give advice to them, they're not going to really fully understand what this generation deals with and goes through, as to where here's a recent college graduate that's the same age group, and he, excuse me, would go through the same, could actually understand it because I just went through it. So I think it is important to, I totally agree with you on that, that I think some generations um gravitate towards the same age group compared to people that may have had more years and years of experience. I've kind of have seen that and have been told that. Um, but I think your conversation and your message is really important, going from a path where you could have easily ended up in prison and could have spent your whole life in there and changed it to be still be in the Marine Corps as well as being um, running a very successful organization and really helping kids out and really portraying a good message. I think is really, really inspiring. If someone's listening and would like to maybe learn more about your organization and they would like to learn more about your cause, where can they all find you at and best get in contact with you and best connect with you?
Absolutely. So the best way to contact me is to go to parent-child-connect.com. I would love for people to reach out. Just go to the contact form. You can shoot me an email. You can go look at all the downloadable resources. Of course, you can check out my books. You can subscribe to my blog. There's just so many things that you can do. But the first thing is just go to parent-child-connect.com. And I'd love to see you there.
Alrighty, well, I appreciate you so, so much for coming on the show today and sharing your story. As I do with all my guests, as I always do, I'll put all of his links in the description box below. I'll put his website as well as some social media accounts down there as well for you to have so that if you'd like to connect with him on socials, you're more than welcome to do that, as well as his website, where if you would like to look at his blog, if you'd like to get in contact with him through there and learn more about his mission, it'll all be there for you guys to have. Um, Feel free to follow the podcast on the socials as well, Instagram and TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcast. And as always, listen to Lethal Venom wherever you get your podcast from. I'm on all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It is everywhere, so feel free to subscribe so that you'll get notified of when new episodes come out. Thank you to everyone for tuning in today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed it like I did. Y'all all have a great rest of your day. Be safe, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.